Have you ever noticed that every paradise hides a darker side? Hawaii, with its perfect beaches and towering volcanoes, is no exception. Behind the sun and the waves, there is a heavy silence filled with ancient legends and real stories that were never meant to be told. Tourists vanish without leaving a trace. Highways hide restless spirits that refuse to let go, and locals still whisper that some curses are alive, waiting for their next victim. Tonight, you will hear 10 true horror stories from Hawaii, so disturbing. They might change forever the way you see this paradise. Now tell me, would you dare to walk these trails or drive down these haunted roads after hearing what happened there? Type your answer in the comments, because after tonight, you may think twice before setting foot in Hawaii. They say that on certain nights in Hawaii, when the moon is high and the air feels too heavy to breathe, the ground itself begins to tremble. Locals know what it means. It is not the shifting of the earth. It is the march of spirits, the night marchers. Long ago, these were warriors of flesh and blood, ferocious defenders of their kings and chiefs, sworn to protect even beyond death. But their loyalty twisted into a curse. When they fell in battle, their spirits refused rest. Now, they walk the islands eternally, bound to ancient paths of war. Spears raised, drums echoing, chants carried on the wind. Each step a reminder that the old gods have never left. Those unlucky enough to witness them describe the same dreadful signs: the faint sound of conch shells drifting on the breeze, the pounding of invisible drums that rattle your bones before your ears even register the sound. And then, torches. Dozens of fiery lights materialize in the distance, swaying in rhythm, moving closer and closer, until your heart dares not beat. Witnesses swear the warriors are solid, fully formed bodies painted in war colors, feathered helmets catching the moonlight, eyes blazing with something not of this world. Their chants are deafening war cries piercing the night. Some march barefoot, others hover inches above the ground, shadows distorted against the earth. But the terror is not just in seeing them, it is in what they demand. The night marchers are sacred, guardians of chiefs and kings, even in death. Cross their path and fail to show respect, and you pay the ultimate price. Legend says you must drop flat to the ground, face buried in the dirt, never daring to look up, because if you meet their eyes, your soul will be ripped from your body, leaving only a husk behind. Locals tell stories of those who were careless, a young couple hiking late at night, ignoring the warnings of elders. They laughed when they heard what they thought were drums in the forest. Minutes later, other hikers found their belongings scattered, but their bodies were never recovered. Only a trail of blackened earth remained where they had stood. Others speak of a soldier stationed near an old battleground. He claimed he saw torches flickering outside his post. Thinking it was trespassers, he stepped out, rifle in hand. Hours later, his fellow soldiers found him lying face down in the dirt, eyes wide open, lips frozen mid-scream. He was alive, but hollow. He never spoke another word for the rest of his life. The march is never random. The spirits travel along ancient paths, routes once connecting battlegrounds and sacred sites. Even today, locals refuse to build homes across them. Some houses are built with open hallways, front to back, so that if the night marchers come, they may pass through without tearing the home apart. To block their way is to invite destruction. Perhaps the most chilling tales are from those who hear the march, yet never see it. A woman in Oahu recalls being woken by chanting outside her window. The air grew thick, suffocating. Her dogs whimpered, crawling under the bed. The sound of footsteps grew louder, hundreds of feet pounding in perfect rhythm. She buried her face into the floorboards, trembling. When silence finally returned, she opened her eyes and found muddy footprints across her living room floor. Though every door and window was locked from within, even those who survive are never the same. They speak of the cold that follows them, dreams filled with battle cries, shadows moving just out of sight. Some claim the spirits mark you, returning night after night, until you finally join them in their endless march. To this day, Hawaiians warn: if you hear drums after dark, if you see flickering torches in the distance, do not watch, do not speak, do not run. Press your body to the earth, close your eyes, and pray that the march passes you by. Because the night marchers are not just legend, they are guardians of loyalty, of blood, of a time when death was never the end. And if you cross their path unprepared, you won't live to tell the story. You will march with them, forever. Deep in the lush, untamed heart of Oahu, there are trails that stretch endlessly into the jungle. They look harmless, welcoming even. Tall palms sway gently in the wind, and the air smells of wet earth and orchids. Waterfalls roar in the distance like living drums, calling travelers deeper inside. But paradise has shadows, and some paths are not meant to be walked. Some paths are hungry, and once you step onto them, the jungle decides whether you return. For decades, whispers have spread across the island. Whispers of tourists who vanish without a trace, couples on romantic getaways, backpackers chasing the perfect Instagram shot, seasoned hikers who thought they knew every trail. They walk in, but they don't walk out. Instead, the forest swallows them whole, leaving behind only fragments. Fragments that are chilling, disturbing. The earliest stories dates back to the 1980s, a young couple from California, excited for their first trip to Hawaii. They hiked near the lush green walls of Manoa Falls. It was supposed to be a short walk, an afternoon adventure. But as night fell, they didn't return. Their hotel room stayed empty. Their rental car sat waiting in the parking lot. Search teams swarmed the forest. Helicopters thundered overhead. Dogs sniffed the ground, pulling handlers through mud and vines. But after days of searching, all they found was a single backpack. It wasn't on the ground. It was stuck high in the branches of a tree, far too high for a human to throw, and the straps were torn, as if ripped by something powerful. The couple was never seen again. Years passed, but the island didn't forget. In the early 2000s, another story surfaced. A solo traveler, mid-30s, experienced hiker, prepared for everything: water, food, maps, GPS. He set out along the Makapu'u Trail just as the sun began to rise. Evening, he hadn't returned. By morning, his friends called for help. When rescuers searched the trail, they found his phone, shattered against a rock. Nearby, his shoes, placed neatly side by side, as though he had taken them off and walked away barefoot. But there were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just silence. He was gone, and to this day, not a single clue has been found. After that case, even veteran park rangers refused to walk that section of the trail, alone. After dark, the disappearances didn't stop. They multiplied, and with them came patterns. Searchers reported carvings in tree trunks, not graffiti, not initials, but frantic words scratched with desperation. Don't follow the drums. Others found stone piles, arranged in strange spirals, miles from any campsite. No explanation. No reason for them to exist. At night, locals swore they heard chanting carried by the wind. Voices that didn't belong. Voices that chilled the blood. Some believe these vanishings are the work of the night marchers, the spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors cursed to roam forever. They walk in single file, torches burning, drums echoing through the jungle. If you see them, they say, you must throw yourself to the ground, face pressed into the dirt, eyes shut tight. Because if you dare to look at them, your soul is claimed, forever. Witnesses claim they felt the ground vibrate under invisible feet. Others saw faint lights moving in the trees, glowing like torches in the dark, and some heard the steady beat of drums growing louder and louder, until suddenly, silence. But not everyone blames spirits. Some whisper of something darker, something that doesn't belong to this world. They say it calls to travelers. It mimics the voices of people you love, a friend, a parent, a lover. It whispers your name from the shadows, drawing you off the trail. And once you leave the path, the jungle closes in. You can scream, but no one will hear you. You can run, but the forest runs faster. Those who vanish are never returned. Skeptics, however, offer another theory. They believe Oahu's mountains hide more than waterfalls and caves. Beneath the ground lie old military tunnels, entrances disguised, maps erased. What if these hikers stumbled upon something they were never supposed to see? A door, a chamber, A secret worth killing for. One case still chills investigators. A camera was discovered, buried in mud. Its final image showed a hiker's face, eyes wide, mouth frozen in silent terror. Seconds later, blackness. Police called it a glitch. Locals did not, and even today, the stories continue. Every year more tourists vanish in Oahu. Some return, days later, but they're never the same. They speak of lost time, hours erased, days forgotten. Others never come back. So if you ever hike in Oahu and the air suddenly turns heavy, if you hear drums echoing in the mountains, or worse, a familiar voice calling your name from the trees, remember the ones who vanished. Remember the shoes, the shattered phone, the desperate carvings begging you not to follow. Because Oahu is paradise, but paradise has shadows, and some shadows never let you leave. Old hospital in Honolulu still stands like a shadow over the city, its walls heavy with decades of whispered tragedies. At night, when the trade winds move through its broken shutters, the building doesn't just creak, it breathes, and those who dare to walk its halls after midnight carry scars they cannot explain. Nurses were always the first to notice. During the night shifts, when silence stretched too long, the sound of soft footsteps would echo in the corridors, too slow, too deliberate, to belong to anyone rushing between patients. One nurse swore she heard those steps right behind her, heels tapping against the linoleum floor. Yet when she turned, the hallway was empty. Still, she could feel it, a presence close enough to brush the back of her neck. The abandoned maternity ward. Staff reported the cries of newborns, faint, muffled wails drifting through locked doors, even though no baby had been delivered there for decades. One janitor quit after hearing a woman's lullaby, rising from an empty room, soothing a child that did not exist. Patients, too, had stories etched into their final days. One elderly man, dying of heart failure, begged a nurse to stay. His voice trembled as he whispered that a woman in white had been standing by his bed, watching him. She said nothing. She only stared with hollow eyes until she turned and walked into the wall. Hours later, he was gone. Security guards tell the darkest stories. They patrol the basements, where lights flicker without reason and shadows stretch too long. One guard claimed he followed a figure in scrubs down the stairwell, only to watch it vanish into a locked morgue. Inside, there was nothing except the chilling sound of a metal drawer sliding shut by itself. Some believe the hospital is cursed because of what lies beneath it. Long before the building existed, ancient Hawaiian burial grounds rested on that land. It was sacred soil. Disturbing it came with consequences. Now, they say, spirits of warriors and ancestors walk the corridors, angry, restless, waiting. There is one legend whispered among the staff. They call her the woman of the third floor. Nurses claimed they saw her reflection in the glass, even though the hallway behind them was empty. She appears with long black hair, a hospital gown, and eyes so dark they swallow the light. Those who see her up close suffer weeks of nightmares, visions of drowning in blood, or waking up strapped to a hospital bed with no way to scream. One nurse broke down after such an encounter. She was charting late at night when she saw the woman staring at her from the corner. Terrified, she froze. The figure stepped closer, until it was only inches from her face. She swore she felt its icy breath. And then, it vanished. She never returned to work after that night. Visitors sometimes leave with their own scars. A tourist, curious about the haunted reputation, wandered into the abandoned wards. His camera captured hours of footage, but when he played it back, there were gaps, minutes missing, static filling the screen, whispers in Hawaiian, words no one could translate. Weeks later, he disappeared. His rental car was found near the shoreline, but he was never seen again. What makes this hospital different is not just the apparitions. It's the feeling that once you step inside, something notices you. A gaze, heavy and invisible, follows you down every hallway. Elevators open on floors you didn't choose. Wheelchairs roll across the room on their own. And always, the faint sound of crying, somewhere in the dark, Those who've spent nights inside claim the spirits are purposeful. They know who you are. They choose who they reveal themselves to. Some say they're seeking help. Others insist they're seeking replacements. And perhaps the most chilling detail, the hospital never truly closed. Yes, the wards were shut down. The patients relocated. But people still go in. Urban explorers, thrill seekers, skeptics. They laugh at the stories until they come out pale, trembling, unwilling to speak. Some don't come out at all. If you ever visit Honolulu, you might pass the building without noticing. But if you stop, if you stand too close, you may hear it. The faint echo of footsteps behind you, the cry of a child carried by the wind. And if you are unlucky enough to look up at the third-floor window, you might see her, the woman in the gown, waiting, watching, daring you to come inside, because once you do, you're no longer just a visitor. You're part of its story, and the hospital never forgets. House in Maui was never meant to be just a house. Locals whispered it was hungry, and the families who dared to live there all told the same story. Only the names ever changed. The first family moved in during the summer. They noticed it the very first night, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, even though everyone was asleep. When the father checked the kitchen, every chair was pulled away from the table, perfectly aligned, as if someone had placed them in formation. He thought it was a prank, but then they began hearing the whispers. It wasn't words at first, just the low breath of someone standing too close, too intimate. At midnight, the mother woke to the sound of her name being spoken softly beside her ear. But when she turned, her husband was fast asleep. She never told him. Not until weeks later, when their daughter came into the bedroom pale as chalk, crying that, "The voices won't stop asking me to play." Other family arrived years later, unaware of what had happened before. They tried to laugh off the stories, to call them myths, but their laughter ended the night the furniture moved in front of them. The living room lamp tipped on its own, sliding across the carpet as if pulled by invisible hands. The father swore it was an earthquake, but the floor was still. And then the voices grew bolder. They began to hear them chanting, low guttural tones that rose from the walls themselves. Every night at 3 a.m., footsteps would echo through the hallway, heavy, deliberate, the sound of someone walking slowly from one end of the house to the other. And when the door opened on its own, the family saw nothing but the dark hallway stretching into silence. The third family, the house had earned its name. The Poltergeist House of Maui. Neighbors warned them. They didn't listen. The first week seemed normal, too normal. But then, the disturbances returned with a vengeance. The youngest boy complained about someone pulling his blanket away every night. When his mother stayed with him, she felt the tug herself, and swore a hand brushed across hers in the dark. Soon, objects weren't just moving. They were flying. Plates hurled across the kitchen. Doors slammed shut with enough force to crack their frames. The voices were no longer whispers, but angry shouts, overlapping, impossible to understand, yet filled with rage. And when they finally brought a priest to bless the house, the activity reached its peak. During the prayer, every cabinet in the kitchen flew open at once. The table lifted a few inches off the ground, and in the corner of the room, a shadow gathered, thick and heavy, like smoke forming a body. The priest refused to finish the ritual. He simply told the family, "This house does not want you here." They left within the week. The house has stood empty for years now. Locals cross the street rather than walk near its gate. Tourists sometimes stop to take pictures, laughing about the legend. But those who stay long enough claim they hear it too. The scraping of chairs against the floor. The whispers carried on the trade winds, voices too close to be mistaken for the breeze. If you dare to stand at its windows after midnight, some say you'll see them. The silhouettes moving through the rooms, shadows that don't belong to you, waiting, watching, restless. The Poltergeist House of Maui has no official record of death within its walls, but every family who lived there swears it tried to drive them mad. Furniture shifting, whispers digging into their dreams, footsteps echoing down halls that should have been empty. They all left with the same warning: the house does not want you there. And if you ever find yourself in Maui staring at the old house at the edge of the road, remember, don't listen when it whispers your name, because once it starts speaking to you, it never stops. Family never meant to bring a curse into their home. It started with what seemed like an innocent souvenir, a doll, handmade, its dark glass eyes framed by painted lashes, its body dressed in a small traditional Hawaiian outfit. It was purchased from a small roadside shop in Oahu. The old woman who sold it warned, almost in a whisper, "This one doesn't like to be taken far." But the family laughed it off. How dangerous could a doll really be? At first, the doll sat quietly on a shelf in their living room, a reminder of their tropical vacation. But soon, things began to shift. Objects in the house were not where they had been left. Keys vanished, only to appear inside the refrigerator. The family dog refused to enter the living room, snarling and backing away whenever its eyes caught the doll's gaze. At night, they began to hear faint scratching sounds coming from the shelf. The youngest daughter, barely 7 years old, claimed she saw the doll blink. Parents dismissed it as childhood imagination. Until one evening, the father found the doll lying in the middle of the hallway. Nobody admitted moving it. Its little arms were stretched upward, as if reaching for him. From that night forward, dread settled into the house. Strange accidents followed. The mother slipped on the stairs, breaking her wrist. She swore she felt something push her back. The teenage son woke with long scratches down his arm, thin and deliberate, as if carved by small fingers. The grandmother, who visited only once, refused to return after claiming she heard a woman's voice singing an old Hawaiian lullaby in the middle of the night, though no one in the house knew such a song. The family tried locking the doll away in the attic, but within days, it reappeared downstairs. Once it was found sitting at the dinner table, propped in a chair, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. Another time, it lay on the daughter's bed, its face turned toward the window, as though watching for something. Neighbors began to notice too. They whispered about shadows moving behind the curtains when the family was away. One neighbor claimed she saw the doll's silhouette in the upstairs window, yet the family was out of town that weekend. The worst came in winter. The father, once healthy and strong, collapsed from sudden chest pains. Doctors found no clear cause. He died within hours. At his funeral, the daughter swore the doll's lips curled into a smile. From that moment, grief mixed with terror. They were convinced the doll was claiming lives. The mother, desperate, tried to destroy it. She threw it into the fireplace, but the flames would not consume it. Its painted eyes grew darker, glossy with smoke, but the fabric never burned. Panicked, she pulled it from the fire and buried it in the backyard. That night, thunder shook the house, though the skies were clear. The next morning, the doll was back, sitting on the kitchen counter, its dress covered in dirt. Family's misfortunes spiraled. The son was involved in a sudden car crash. Though he survived, he swore he saw the doll in the passenger seat seconds before impact. The daughter fell gravely ill, doctors baffled by her condition, and the mother herself began to hear whispers at night. Low, chanting voices speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Every whisper seemed to come from the shelf where the doll once sat. Finally, out of sheer terror, the mother reached out to a Hawaiian priest, a kahuna, begging for help. When he entered the home, he refused to touch the doll. He only stared at it from a distance and whispered, "This was not made for children. It carries a spirit, and it does not belong here." He instructed them to return it to the islands, to the place where it had been taken. The mother followed his guidance. She flew back to Hawaii, carrying the doll wrapped tightly in cloth. She returned to the same roadside shop, but the old woman who sold it was gone, no sign she had ever been there. The shop was abandoned, its windows boarded up. No choice, the mother left the doll at the base of an old banyan tree, deep in the forest. Locals say that tree was once a sacred place, where offerings were made to wandering spirits. She whispered an apology, set the doll down, and left without looking back. When she returned home, the atmosphere had shifted. The scratching sound stopped. The whispers ended. The dog entered the living room again. For the first time in months, the family slept peacefully, yet the story did not end. A year later, tourists hiking near that same banyan tree reported finding a doll sitting at its roots. They took photos, joking about its eerie stare. A week later, one of those tourists drowned in what should have been calm waters. Another was injured in a freak accident, and soon the photos began circulating online, drawing new victims to the story. The family never spoke publicly again about what they endured, but locals whisper that the cursed doll still sits beneath that tree, waiting, and those who touch it do not return unchanged. Rain always comes first on the Pali Highway, thin curtains of water sliding down the steep cliffs, slicking the road until headlights smear into ghostly streaks. Drivers know to grip the wheel tighter here. The curves are sharp, the drop is unforgiving, and the silence between thunderclaps feels too heavy, like something else is listening. That's when they see her. A lone woman standing at the shoulder, her pale dress soaked through, her hair clinging in ropes to her face. She doesn't wave, she doesn't smile. She just stands there, eyes fixed on the oncoming car, as if she has been waiting all night. Most drivers swear they didn't want to stop, but something compels them. Guilt, maybe, or an invisible hand tightening in their chest. The moment the brakes squeal, she glides closer. She doesn't open the door, it opens for her, and then she's in the back seat. Every story agrees on that detail. She never sits in the front. At first, it feels ordinary enough. She's quiet, dripping water onto the seat, her gaze locked on the passing jungle outside. But the air shifts. It grows heavy, damp, as though the car itself has sunk beneath the ocean. The dashboard lights dim. Even the radio crackles with static, whispering in bursts that almost form words. One man said he tried to ask her name. Her head turned slowly, revealing eyes that weren't quite human. Black pools without whites, reflecting nothing, swallowing everything. She didn't answer in English. What left her lips was an older tongue, each syllable sharp as broken coral, vibrating through the car's frame. Another driver confessed that when he looked in the rearview mirror, her reflection wasn't there. The seat appeared empty, yet he could feel cold breath on the back of his neck. Sometimes she waits. Miles of silence, just her presence pressing down on every heartbeat. And then, gone. No door sound, no shift in weight, just an empty seat drenched in water. The smell of salt lingers, and the driver notices handprints streaked across the inside of the glass. Other times, the ending is crueler. One woman claimed that as she turned into the tunnel, she felt fingers curl over her shoulder from behind. Not a touch, an anchor. The wheel jerked. The car almost slammed into the wall before she tore herself free, swerving back onto the lane. When she dared to glance back, the passenger was gone, but the seatbelt was still buckled, tightening and loosening, like something had just released it. Old stories whisper that she is Pele herself, the goddess of fire and vengeance, punishing those who carry pork over the Pali. Others say she is a betrayed bride, a woman who leapt from the cliffs centuries ago, doomed to walk the road until someone takes her home. Yet no one knows where home is. No one has ever delivered her safely. Say the worst mistake is to ignore her, to drive past without stopping, because even then, she finds a way in. Some drivers report the sudden wait in the back seat mid-journey, their headlights flickering as though she had slipped through the rain straight into their car. You can lock the doors. It doesn't matter. She doesn't knock. She chooses. Every tale ends the same way, with a driver pulling over, trembling, unable to breathe, staring at an empty car that still feels full. They swear they'll never take the Pali Highway again at night. Yet the next storm comes, and another driver makes the climb. The question isn't whether she'll appear, it's whether she'll leave. If you ever find yourself driving that road after midnight with rain hammering the windshield and your headlights slicing through the mist, look closely at the shoulder. If you see a woman standing alone, don't look away, because once she sets her eyes on you, she's already inside. They say the goddess of fire has eyes everywhere. On the edge of the Kīlauea volcano, where the earth bleeds molten rivers, travelers once thought they could outsmart her. They believed they could pocket the island stones, tiny souvenirs of the underworld, and escape unnoticed. But Pele is patient. She always collects what is hers. It begins innocently. A tourist kneels at the blackened shore, picks up a piece of hardened lava, smooth and sharp at the edges. The ocean crashes behind them, the air thick with sulfur. They smile, thinking they've stolen a fragment of Hawaii itself. But when the sun dips and the island darkens, that stone feels heavier than it should. It pulses in their pocket, as if alive. And the silence around them grows suffocating. On the road out of the park, accidents follow like shadows. Cars that ran fine all day suddenly spin out of control. Tires burst, engines stall. And sometimes in the moments before impact, passengers claim they saw her, Pele, standing barefoot in the middle of the road, hair like fire, eyes glowing through the night. She doesn't need to speak. The message is clear. You took what belongs to me. Stories spread quickly among locals. Postcards, letters, entire boxes filled with rocks are mailed back to Hawaii every year. The park rangers call them cursed packages. They arrive from every corner of the world, often accompanied by desperate notes scrawled in shaky handwriting. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. My family has suffered enough. One letter told of a man who ignored the warnings. He carried a stone home across the ocean, laughing at the superstition. Within weeks, his house caught fire in the middle of the night. His wife escaped with burns, his son with scars that never healed. The only thing untouched by the flames was the stone, sitting in the center of the charred living room floor, black as the day he stole it. Another package came from a young woman in Europe. She admitted she had taken a handful of volcanic sand. Afterward, her life unraveled piece by piece. Her engagement ended suddenly. Her health declined, and she was plagued with recurring nightmares of a woman screaming her name through a veil of smoke. She begged the rangers to return the sand to its rightful place, fearing that Pele would never stop until she did. But not all stories end with survival. In 1997, a couple visiting from the mainland ignored the guide's caution. They left with pockets full of lava rock. On the drive back from the crater, their car veered off the road and plunged into a ravine. When rescuers reached the wreckage, the rocks were scattered across the ground, glistening as if freshly forged. Witnesses swear they heard laughter echoing through the valley, a sound like fire crackling carried on the wind. Locals say Pele punishes not with rage, but with balance. Each stone removed from the island tips the scale of her dominion. To restore it, she takes something in return. It might be a job, a relationship, a life. And the cruelest part is that she doesn't strike immediately. She waits. Weeks, months, sometimes years. Long enough for the thief to forget. Long enough for them to believe they got away. And then, when their guard is lowest, Pele reaches out with hands of flame. Even skeptics find themselves unsettled when they hear the statistics. Hundreds of accidents linked to visitors who confess to taking lava. Entire families torn apart, not by coincidence, but by consequence. Rangers no longer bother convincing tourists. They let the land do the teaching. Because when you stand near Kīlauea, watching molten rock ooze into the sea, it's impossible not to feel it, the hum of something ancient beneath your feet, a force older than the island itself. Watching, waiting. One ranger keeps a small collection of letters in his office. It's not about belief, he says. It's about respect. Whether you think Pele is real or not, doesn't matter. The moment you take from her, you've already chosen your side. And so, the warnings remain. Take nothing from Kīlauea. Do not pocket the stones. Do not challenge the goddess of fire. Because if you do, the curse of Pele will follow you. Across oceans, across years, into your home, into your dreams, until you return what is hers. And even then, she might decide it's not enough. Resort in Kauai still stands like a ghost on the shoreline, its windows shattered, its hallways drenched in shadows, and its rooms frozen in time. Explorers who dare to step inside don't just see decay, they feel something waiting. The first stories come from urban explorers who walk the long corridor leading from the lobby. Their flashlights cut through dust, illuminating faded wallpaper, mold, and broken chandeliers. Yet every time they stopped to take a photo, they heard footsteps continuing behind them, slow, heavy, but when they turned back, the hallway was empty. One explorer swore that in room 213, the door was locked tight, but inside, they heard the sound of a television. Static, hissing softly, like a voice whispering through the walls. When they returned the next day, the electricity was dead throughout the entire building. There was no way that TV could have been on. Other explorers found rooms that looked disturbingly alive. Suitcases still open on the floor, clothes folded neatly on the beds, family photos on the dressers, almost as if the guests had left mid-vacation, abandoning everything. The strangest part? In one of the closets, a dress hung on a hanger, fresh and unstained, untouched by the years of mold that covered everything else. One group described the ballroom. At night, they heard faint music, the echo of a band playing a Hawaiian tune. The sound drifted across the empty dance floor. When they followed the melody, they found a piano standing in the corner. The keys were moving on their own. The kitchen tells another story. Plates still stacked, silverware scattered across the floor. One explorer filmed the moment a fork slid across the counter as if pushed by unseen hands. In the freezer, the door slammed shut by itself, locking one of them inside for nearly 10 minutes, even though the handle wasn't broken. When they finally pried it open, the explorer inside swore he heard someone breathing with him in the dark. But the most chilling reports come from the West Wing. There, water still drips from cracked ceilings, pooling across the floor. Explorers say the mirrors in the bathrooms don't reflect properly. Instead of showing their own faces, the glass shows blurred figures standing just behind them. Figures that vanish when they turn around. One night, 2 men set up sleeping bags in one of the suites, determined to spend the night. At exactly 3 a.m., both of them woke up to the sound of doors slamming shut down the hall. One after another. Boom, 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 until it stopped at their room. The knob turned slowly. Their cameras caught the sound of breathing, low and guttural, just outside, but the door never opened. Another explorer found the basement. The smell of mildew was overpowering, but what terrified him wasn't the rot. It was the walls, covered in names carved deep into the concrete. Hundreds of them, some with dates, some with words like leave and never safe. One name was carved so violently that the concrete had split. Locals whisper that the resort never truly closed, that when it was abandoned decades ago, it wasn't because of money. Guests had gone missing, families checked in, but never checked out. The spirits never left. Some say the resort calls to people, luring explorers deeper inside. Several groups have reported losing track of time, thinking they had been inside for an hour, only to step outside and discover the entire night had passed. And one explorer never came back. His friends said he was walking just a few steps ahead in the dark corridor. Then his flashlight went out. When they ran forward to find him, the hallway stretched endlessly, longer than before. They searched for hours, screaming his name, until finally stumbling out through a broken window. Authorities combed the building. They never found him. The resort in Kauai doesn't just decay. It waits. It feeds on curiosity, on footsteps, on fear. Some explorers leave with footage they can't explain. Some leave with scratches across their backs and bruises in the shapes of hands. And some never leave at all. So if you ever find yourself on the island, staring at that empty building on the horizon, ask yourself, would you dare to step inside? Because the resort is still there, silent, rotting, and it is hungry. The ocean off Oahu looked calm that morning, the kind of stillness that makes divers feel safe. But sometimes, the ocean pretends. It waits. Kīlauea was an experienced free diver. Locals knew him as someone who could hold his breath longer than anyone, slipping into the water like he belonged to it. That day, he set out near the Kaua coast. Waters so deceptively serene they were called glass by fishermen. He left with his mask, fins, and underwater camera. Hours later, only his equipment floated back. Kīlauea never did. At first, no one panicked. Divers lose track of time. But when the Coast Guard dragged the area, they found his mask and snorkel drifting together, placed as if gently set down. His fins were discovered days later, neatly aligned on the sea floor. No signs of a struggle, no signs of panic, as though he had simply stepped out of them. Witnesses said the water that day was unusually silent. No waves breaking, no seabirds circling. Even the trade wind seemed to vanish. One fisherman swore he saw ripples forming around Kīlauea, spreading in perfect circles, though the sea was flat. He thought it was light playing tricks, until he heard it, deep, hollow drumming beneath the surface. Locals whisper that this stretch of ocean belongs to something old. The mo'o, the ancient lizard spirits of Hawaiian lore. They are said to guard pools, streams, and coastlines. Sometimes they appear as seductive women, luring men into the water. Other times, as shadows so large you can't tell where the ocean ends, and they begin. And for Kīlauea, that day, the legends stopped being legends. Kīlauea's camera was recovered by a diver weeks later, waterlogged but intact. When the footage was cleaned, investigators found the last 30 seconds chilling. At first, the lens showed coral heads and sand channels, nothing unusual. Then, shadows passed over the reef, blotting out the sun above. Not one shadow, but many. They twisted like columns, too slow to be fish, too sinuous to be human. Kīlauea's breathing quickened. You could hear it echoing inside his snorkel. Then, a low vibration filled the audio. Not whale song, not current. A steady rhythm, like drums struck underwater. The camera shook violently, bubbles flooding the frame. For a split second, his face reflected in the lens, eyes wide, staring past the camera at something behind. His mouth opened in a scream you couldn't hear. And then, silence. The screen went black. The police report ruled it as lost at sea. But Hawaiians don't believe it was an accident. They know the legends. They say the mo'o claim those who trespass too deep. They say the ocean doesn't always take you violently. It just decides you don't belong anymore. And here's the detail that unsettles even seasoned divers. When Kīlauea's wetsuit was later found tangled in reef branches, it was still zipped shut. No tears, no damage, just empty. Some claim to hear him still, out past Kaua, when the water is unnaturally calm. The sound of fins brushing water, a diver's exhale, then a voice, muffled and distant, calling for help from beneath. But when rescuers dive down, there's nothing, only the stillness of the ocean, waiting, and the drumming, always the drumming. So the next time you see the Hawaiian Sea lying flat as glass, ask yourself, is it really safe? Or is it watching? Waiting? Because if Kīlauea could vanish in calm water, leaving everything behind but his skin of gear, what chance would you have? The ocean does not forget. And in Hawaii, it does not forgive. First thing you notice is the smell. Wet iron and red dirt, like the earth in Wahiawa has been bleeding all day. The highway noise dissolves behind the trees, and the forest swallows you in one step, the way water does when you slip under. My flashlight is a thin bone of light between ironwoods and guava, the path braided with roots that seem to move when I'm not looking. They say not to come here after the sun falls behind the pineapple fields. They say the forest keeps what walks into it. I told myself I was only here for audio, for proof the screams were just hawks or wind. Lies are easier to carry than fear. The air is humid enough to drink. Mosquitoes whir at my ears. Somewhere far off, Kokonahua Stream talks to the stones, and Lake Wilson breathes black in its basin. I clip the recorder to my hoodie. The red light stares back at me like an unwilling witness. At first, the forest is ordinary, fern scrapes, palm fronds gossiping, a gecko's laugh, the drip of water from leaf to leaf. I walk until the smell shifts to mildew and cold tar. My shoes sink, come up stringed with red. Then the first scream cuts the canopy. It isn't high or theatrical, it's low, strangled, like a voice learning how to be a voice again. Another scream rises further in, not an animal, not quite human, something in between. The ironwoods hiss. It's only wind, it's only wind. My light catches a rope of vines, then a shape like a shoulder. When I move the beam, it turns to trunk, then stone. My mouth dries. I tell the forest I am leaving, heel to toe, calm, as if backing out of a hospital room. But the path refuses me. My footprints fill with dark water. The trees have learned new geometry. I scratch a mark in the dirt, but it washes smooth by nothing at all. Another scream. Closer, the kind that pushes your ribs open from the inside. I feel it in my teeth. My cousin once said, "Don't look behind you if you hear your name. Don't answer when the forest calls. They don't want your voice. They want your breath." The recorder peaks though the night is still. That's my hand shaking, I tell myself. There is something about shadows in Wahiawa that feels intentional. Not patches of dark, but inhabitants. My flashlight stops on a figure between how trees, shoulder width, taller than me. My heart knows first. It does not flinch from the light. It drinks it. Hey, I try, because people say that when we don't want to be afraid. The word dies in the air. The figure breathes in. The whole forest exhales out. I start to count steps. 1 to the side, 2 back, 3 toward where the path last looked real. The figure moves when I don't. It moves when the light leaves it. It moves like a thought, sudden, already finished. The screams change. They're threaded into the leaves overhead, into unseen black water. Between them, other sounds bloom. Bare feet shuffling, low humming, a clack like a spear butt, kissing stone. I want to say I didn't run. I ran. Branches comb my face. The flashlight swings, then fails. The dark is immediate, like being shut into a stranger's mouth. My breath grows huge. The recorder rides my chest like a captive bird. The forest lets me stop at a clearing I don't remember. The ground is flat and strangely clean. The moon lights the red dirt in a way that does not feel like help. The humming circles. The grasses part without wind. The shape stands at the edge, not alone. Others isn't the right word. They are an arrangement, like a sentence that knows its grammar too well. None show their faces. They don't need to. You feel a gaze the way you feel heat. Cheekbones, forehead, wrist. My palms burn cold. The recorder's red light is an ember from a fire I shouldn't tend. I think of the warnings. Don't carry stones. Don't whistle at night. Don't mock what walks. I hadn't. I had done worse. I had come to listen. One shadow breaks from the others. It slips forward without touching ground, but the ground reacts, dirt lifting, settling. It stops a breath from me. The scream comes from the space between us, where my breath meets what might be its breath and fails. Something cold moves across my collarbone. A fingertip. A test. Not cruel. Not kind. Inventory. It finds my pulse, presses until my heart stumbles. When it releases, I almost thank it. Gratitude blooming in terror is the worst thing. The humming deepens. A dog barks once, then silence. The figure leans as if to smell me, and I hear words, not in my ear, but under my ribs, where names live. Go. Not mercy. A verdict. I back away. Heel to toe. Heel to toe. The clearing does not change its mind. The shadows arrange themselves around the space I had filled, plugging it perfectly. The path untwists. I don't remember the gate. I remember the night giving me back my weight as highway noise returned, as if I'd been walking in water and crawled to land. I didn't look behind. I didn't say, thank you. I pressed stop on the recorder with hands that weren't mine. At home, red dirt falls from my shoes. The audio loads, a skyline of quiet with 3 tall towers where screams live. I listen with headphones. Then again, speakers turned away. On the third pass, when I boost the low humming, I hear something in my own voice I hadn't before. I am breathing with something else's rhythm. Tell me if you hear it too. Tell me if you've walked Waiawa after dark, if you've heard the scream that feels like memory, if you've seen a shadow that doesn't give the light back. If the forest ever kept your name on its tongue, write it below and tell me what it said.